Hey guys, well, great to have you again on another monthly Costa Rican Vacations webinar. It's exciting to have everyone joining us once again to discuss adventure travel here in Costa Rica. Today we have Jordan Gill, travel consultant, and Ulrik Oldenburg. Jordan, how's it going? Thank you for joining us.
It's going well. You're welcome. I'm here. Happy, excited about it.
Excellent. Ulrik, how are you doing, sir?
Hey, mate, doing great. Thank you.
Fantastic. And guys, for those of you watching, most of you know if you've watched the first couple of webinars, we've got Pablo. This time he's appearing in Arenal volcano, which may well come up in the conversation today. How you doing, Pablo?
Good. Thank you, Adam. Welcome, everybody.
Good stuff. So, guys, as usual, we're going to discuss for the next 45 minutes, maybe an hour, our top 10 questions regarding everything that is related to adventure travel here in Costa Rica. You can find that we have a question and answer chat function, which you can address your questions to us live. So if you do have questions, get them in. They don't have to be related to adventure travel. It can be anything. Perhaps you're coming to Costa Rica and you have questions for us. Maybe you're in the dreaming phase before planning a trip. You have some questions. Let us know. You will find that we have two of our senior travel consultants, Aaron Vanacek, and also Maite is responding to your questions live. So if you do have questions for Aaron and Maite, get them in. We will get straight back to you, and we will address some of these questions at the end of the webinar as well. So stay on if you have some key questions for us, which we will answer live. But without further ado, guys, for everybody that is signing in, let's start with the big one. So Jordan, I'm going to throw this to you first. What makes Costa Rica one of the top destinations potentially in the world for adventure travel? Why is it so cool?
I think the clear reason is that it's just a natural playground. It's not like they had to construct something to attract people to come here because of the adventure. It just is naturally adventurous. You've got the wildlife, which is, already exotic and unique. And then on top of that, you've got the mountains that are so close to the ocean, which creates the, really dramatic rivers and landscapes, and everything just is sort of built into the natural ecosystem here, which just kind of makes it just naturally adventurous. And then also, adventure means different things to different people. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be hardcore adrenaline activities. Some people just leaving their hometown and their home country is an adventure. So just the fact that it's so exotic and so unique and different is also just, makes it adventurous in itself.
It's crazy, right, to think that the size of the country, the amount of diverse geography that you have here, the climate zones, volcanoes, mountains, rainforests, cloud forests, beaches. I mean, the list could go on. Ulrik, do you have a particular area that you love, or would you add any other reason as to why it's so awesome?
That's a good question. So to answer, do I have a particular place I love? I love every location for its unique, different experiences that they offer. So if you were to choose, for example, a beach destination, I don't have one preferential beach destination. I have like three or four, because your Central Pacific area, the Capos, Manuel Antonio area, is an abundant wildlife. It's where the mountains come crashing to the ocean. And I always tell people it's kind of like the real Jurassic Park of Costa Rica without the dinosaurs. And
Right.
whereas in Guanacaste, it's more of reminds me of the Africa dry savanna forest, right? Except for without the elephants. So I like that area for different regions. And then when you get to the volcano areas, I love Arenal, of course, because that's like known as the adventure capital of Costa Rica.
100%. It's funny to think, for those of you who are maybe watching, we also have a podcast, the Travel and Living podcast. When we discussed that, I was chatting recently with one of our guests that even in the last 30, 40 years, the geography doesn't really change that much. And the adventure, even in the late 80s, 90s, is still the same. Whitewater rafting, class 3 to 4 to 5 rapids, zip lining all over the country, no longer just in the mountainous areas, Monteverde, Arenal. There is so much to do, two different coasts, as you say. And I think, like you said, Guanacaste offers something very different from the Central Pacific, Central Valley, the Caribbean plain. And Jordan, you made a good point. The adventure is defined in really how you want to enjoy it, because there is an awful lot of how extreme do you want the adventure, to also exploring national parks, hiking, which for some people is certainly quite tiring depending on which park you go to. Jordan, do you have a specific area that you love in the country?
I love where I live, actually, the Central Pacific Southern Zone, kind of what Ulrik was saying, near Manuel Antonio. I always say if someone has only time to go to one destination, I think the most bang for your buck is Manuel Antonio area. I live about an hour south of that in Uvita, which is, it's just the best because it has literally the mountains jut out of the sea. We've got waterfalls, we've got the beach, we've got surfing, and then but you also have really great wildlife, and there's also like hidden gems that people don't really know about, like secret hot springs, but
Yeah.
things like that. So we have everything basically except for the volcano. So that's why I like this area the best, the central Pacific.
I've got that question about hidden gems. I'm going to save that to keep people engaged a little bit longer. Something to pick you up on, Ulrik, obviously. So for those of you that have maybe done some research, you probably recognize the iconic volcano behind Pablo if you're watching this live. So as you mentioned, Arenal volcano, definitely the adventure capital of Costa Rica. It's going to come up on most people's bucket list when coming here. And I think more or less we have a stats around 75 to 80% of everybody that comes to Costa Rica. If you're doing 2 destinations, you're probably going to go to the Arenal volcano area first, 2, 3, maybe 4 nights, depending on how long you're staying, before going to the second or third location. So, Ulrik, what makes the Arenal volcano the adventure capital?
Well, I think it was, when it was first starting out, and when I first started visiting it years and years ago, it was an iconic volcano that you could see from your bedroom at nighttime with the eruptions and your feet at the end of the bed, and that was pretty spectacular. But unfortunately, the volcano kind of went a little dormant about 10, 15 years ago. And so the hotels needed to figure out, hey, we got to keep our A game going. And so they started adding other activities other than just seeing a volcano. And so there was already the hot springs, as Jordan mentioned, which is phenomenal, different hot springs throughout the volcano area of Arenal. But there was more of, oh, wait, we can actually go for hikes around the volcano. We can go for hikes around the lake, which is a man-made lake from the hydroelectrical project. And there's quite a few of that. Then there came along, for example, the ATV tours. Which is the adrenaline, activities, as well as the nature lover activities, right? So there are some great animal sanctuaries there where Costa Rica doesn't really have zoos. They have a lot of animal rescue places where animals were either, injured and they try to bring them back and what have you. So you can really get the best of both worlds. I always tell clients, if you're an adventure lover, it's perfect. If you're an adrenaline junkie, it's perfect. And if you want a little combination of both, you can certainly do that.
Yeah, totally agree. Guys, I'm actually sending you a link here. So in the chat, you can actually see a link if you want to check out our video tour, the adventure around the volcano. I agree. And not only all of those tours that you've mentioned, like you said, when it went a bit more dormant, a bit quieter. So how are you going to make the area still, attractive? Obviously, seeing the volcano, if you're lucky enough. Sometimes it does get cloudy, right? But if you do have the luck and you're here 2 or 3 days, you can usually see the summit, depending on the time of year. You do have more zipline options, more ATVs, horseback riding, treks into the forest, the jungles, even whitewater rafting in that specific area. I believe there's Rio Balsa, that's 2 to 3, and then Rio Toro, which is not too far away, 3 to 4 rapids. So that I guess it's because there's so much condensed in that specific area, as well as the famous hot springs, which have now popped up through different hotels, larger areas. And you mentioned the man-made lake, which sometimes I think when people arrive for the first time, they don't necessarily know it's man-made. I mean, it is a huge lake, right? It takes 3 hours to drive around just to get to Monteverde on the other side, which looks really close on the map. So I guess, yeah, it is a great place with so much diversity of things to do. Jordan, what would you say if you're going to the Arenal volcano? What is your must-do activities for your first time traveler looking for adventure, specifically around the volcano?
Specifically around the volcano.
Yeah.
Well, we already touched on it. It's the birthplace and of zip lining. I personally, I zip line, but I don't love heights. But man, this is the place. If you're scared of heights, you have to do it here. It is one of those things that's just like anywhere in the world. The zip lining in Arenal is it's incredible. I have clients say to me, "Oh, I've been zip lining in Mexico and Jamaica," and I'm like, "No, no, no. You have not been zip lining until you've been zip lining in Arenal." So I would say that also the waterfall rappelling is also height based, but it is it's incredible with the amount of the waterfalls and just the adventure activities, and they're so available to even kids as young as like 5 years old. So it's very accessible for that. And then yeah, I would say also the whitewater rafting is a great option. But yeah, zip lining hands down, and those hanging bridges, which are you can find in other parts of the country, but the ones in Arenal specifically are just breathtaking. So those would be my two.
Nice. Yeah, really good ones. And we're going to discuss a little bit later as well, adventures for families, because you made a really good point there. There's an awful lot to do, and it depends on your level and what you want to get out of it. If you do have small kids or middle-aged kids, teenagers, as families, there's an awful lot, not just in Arenal. So we'll discuss that in a little bit. Thanks for your questions, guys. There's a question here coming in from Laura. John's got a question. We're going to get to all your questions at the end. Aaron and Maite will probably jump on some of these, but I will ask you right now, because John has just asked Jordan, can you repeat again your favorite part of Costa Rica?
Yes, it's going to be the Central Pacific Valley, but the town specifically where I live and love is Uvita, Uvita. It's about an hour south of Manuel Antonio, Capos area, down before you get to the Osa Peninsula. So that little sweet spot in there is really awesome. It's not as touristy. It's more a lot of expats live down there, locals, but it's special.
Awesome. And I'm excited to pick your brain in a little bit about the hidden gems that you can find around Uvita. So obviously we've discussed Arenal volcano. Most people like to head there. It's about 3 hours, whether you're flying into San Jose or you're flying into Liberia. And then from Arenal, you're in a pretty good location. If you want to mix it with a beach location, you can drive up to the Guanacaste area in the north, or as Jordan mentioned, you can drive down to the Central Pacific around Manuel Antonio. And both those areas are pretty solid and good for adventure as well. Ulrik, let me ask you, if I wanted to mix my trip from Arenal with the beach, but I also wanted to do some adventure at the beach, say I'm going anywhere in Guanacaste, what do I do in Guanacaste in terms of adventure travel that combines well with Arenal volcano?
Well, that's a good one. It's going to depend on your group dynamics. That's what I would say. Okay, so if you're more with the teenagers, then I would have another preference with younger kids if you're with family versus single travelers. So the more adventurous area that I like from Guanacaste, which I lived there for 15 years, is Tamarindo area. They've got some great hotels there. One thing I love about Tamarindo is that you don't have to have a hotel that has you have a good option in the hotel to eat, but you have 100 bars and restaurants and cafes and bistros in Tamarindo alone. That gives you great. I mean, over 100. That's just a phenomenal amount. So it's the busiest beach town in Guanacaste, and probably I would say Costa Rica. And there's lots of adventure tourism there. When I say adventure tourism, I'm talking about diving, surfing, all the water sports you can think of, basically in the Tamarindo area, all the way up to Flamingo through Conchal and Playa Potrero. That is more, in my opinion, of the adventure area, as opposed to the northern area where you've got some really nice properties up there. But it's like the bays are calmer, the waters are calmer, and the Bahia de Culebra. So you have more resort areas where it's kind of great with the kids with a pool, and they can just kind of be in very safe waters and that kind of stuff. When I say safe waters, it's very calm oceans.
Yeah, it's a good point. If you're a diver, it's another nice location. If you consider diving adventure travel, maybe you do. There's some great points around there, Flamingo, Conchal, Tamarindo, that you can leave from. I think it's worth pointing out that if you are in Guanacaste, because of the size of the area, it does take a little bit longer to get back inland to get to any of those potential more adventure-based activities. Another good one is Rincon de la Vieja volcano, just north of the Liberia town. So if you wanted to go up and do some hiking around there, it's not quite as iconic or as iconic as the Arenal volcano in terms of its appearance, but there are a few tours to do around there. It's a good point. Some of those areas on the coast is quite good. Surfing, I got another good water sport. Tamarindo is great for that. Obviously, Pablo's a big surfer. If you were going to the Central and South Pacific, Jordan, so around Jaco, Manuel Antonio, all the way down to Uvita, what would be some of the adventure tours that you could combine on the Central Pacific at the beach?
With the volcano, you mean?
Yeah, so say you've gone to the Arenal volcano, you've enjoyed 3 nights, you've done your hot springs, maybe you did whitewater rafting already, you've done one of the best zip linings. What would you combine that for a thrill seeker down in the Central Pacific?
Yeah, well, actually, one of the things that we offer on our packages, and something I use all the time with my clients, which is a really good thing to combine a travel day and a tour day. We have what we call adventure connections, which are basically they pick you up at the volcano after you've done your few days there. You drive for about an hour and a half. You do a whitewater rafting trip, and then you drive
Nice.
a little bit more, and they'll take you to your beach hotel. So it's a really good way because a lot of people see that driving distance and they get really daunted. But it's a really great way to combine an adventure activity with a travel day. So that's the start of that answer. Also, what I like to focus on is when you do your zip lining and the hanging bridges and things in the volcano area. I like to focus more on like the ocean elements when you're on the coast. So whether that be scuba diving, which you can do in the central, actually the best scuba diving in my opinion is Cano Island, which is in the south of the country, not in Guanacaste. That is the best diving from a diverse perspective. And so that something like scuba diving there, or even just going out and the snorkeling trips have, you have options to see, chances to see, whales, dolphins, turtles, things in the wild, depending on the time of year, of course. And then also things like mangrove tours. It doesn't sound like it would be super adventurous, but you're kayaking or taking a boat in or a stand-up paddleboard in through these mangroves, which are a great way to see like wildlife, but also, be active. So I like to focus on the ocean element of that. However, there are some phenomenal waterfalls in the southern zone, way better than Guanacaste in my opinion. So we've got, there's just dozens that you can choose from. So there's lots of waterfall tours that you can take, and they're definitely pretty epic down there. So
Give me your favorite hidden gem or your favorite hidden waterfall that people may not know off the bat.
I can guarantee most people won't know it. It's the Diamante waterfall. It's kind of near Nayaka, which is also one of the best ones.
Yeah.
Diamante is the hidden gem, and this is something I've done as a personal trip for my birthday. You can do a really good hike, a really strenuous hike, all the way up to reach this waterfall. It's not something you can get to easily. And there's a cave behind the waterfall that you can sleep in
Nice.
overnight, and it's really,
Wow.
really, really cool. So it is something, yeah, it's definitely different. It's not for it's for a very specific type of person, but that is my
Yeah.
favorite thing, the little hidden gem.
I love the idea of camping behind a waterfall
It's
overnight in
really
Costa Rica. That would be pretty awesome to experience that.
it's very cool.
Very cool. Guys, I'm going to add a bunch of these links. I'm going to actually send you the Nayaka waterfall here as well. So whenever you want, you can dip into these comment sections. And if you're interested in any of these, do check them out. I'm also going to share our adventure packages page. So if you are thinking of planning a package, double check that adventure package page. It might give you guys some interest, some options. At the end of the webinar, I'm going to put Jordan and Ulrik's contact information directly. So you can reach out to either the one of them if you need help planning a vacation. Thanks for some of your questions coming in. I see a question here that we'll get to as well. Jindresika, I hope I pronounced that right. Thanks for your question. John Norris, thanks again for the questions coming in. We'll get to some of those later. Keep them coming in, guys. So they're really cool ideas, and I do agree with you about the diving, Jordan. The Isla del Caño off the Osa Peninsula is absolutely beautiful. Great opportunity for whales as well, if you're coming at the right time of year, as well as dolphins. And so many good aquatic experiences along that coastline for sure. So a question that comes up occasionally, and it's something that we've discussed before, is that in terms of national parks or reserves, Ulrik, which ones would you say actually offer some of the best experiences for hiking? Because a lot of people want to come hiking, and we generally tell them that there's not that many communal spaces owned by the government or the local municipalities. But if you do go to a national park, there's a lot of good trails. But which ones do you recommend that are good for hiking?
Well, I'd have to say that my favorite of all the hikes is Corcovado National Park. It's just it's the lungs of Costa Rica. It's the mini Amazon of Costa Rica. It's amazing, the wildlife. There's no other part of the world that I've ever seen like that, and it's my favorite national park. Now that is that is a pretty good hike. Now
That's a
there
big
are
one.
some. Yeah, we have some that actually do a half-day hike in Corcovado, some of our operators, because I know a full day, some of our clients cannot handle that. And so I would recommend a half day. But it's got to be Corcovado National Park.
100%. And it's worth noting that if you do stay with one of the eco lodges that we specifically sell, you can do the half-day tours. I know Pablo's done a lot of work, audiovisual work over the years. When you go there, you can also spend a number of nights if you plan this well in advance, not necessarily with us, but on a real kind of nature proper, hike experience, because it is huge. So that's not necessarily immediately accessible. Again, it's a wonderful place. If you can get to the Osa, you're probably flying in on a small domestic flight. It's a little bit further down in the south. But that, like you say, the lungs of Costa Rica is a really nice way of describing it. 5%, right, of the world's biodiversity, as it's famously been coined by Nat Geo. If I'm not going down as far as Osa, maybe I've only got a week, Jordan, and I'm in Arenal, or maybe I'm going to the beach, Manuel Antonio or Guanacaste afterwards. Are there any other national parks or reserves that you recommend that are a bit more accessible?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always like to I get a lot of, everyone always says hiking, and I think that is a very, very wide range of what that means to different people. So I like to be very clear with people. First of all, it's very hot here in most locations. So I like to make that very clear. So when people are like, oh, we want to hike rigorously for 4 hours, I'm like, if you're coming in March, you might not.
Yeah.
So I agree with Ulrik. The Corcovado is fantastic if you are wanting to look for wildlife and get, a good balance of wildlife and workout. There are places, if you want to go for nature spotting and keep it more easy in terms of like extreme, the Manuel Antonio National Park is very accessible to everyone. It is touristy, so the wildlife is very abundant, and it's, very easy to spot because it's not quite as wild because they're used to people. It's different than Corcovado, which is very, very, very remote and very, very wild. But for me, if you're a hiker and you really want to focus on hiking, I would go to the cloud forests where it's cooler, Monteverde and San Gerardo de Dota. Those areas, the temperature is much lower and the altitude is higher. So you're going to get naturally a really good workout for that. Plus they're really great for birding, really good birding up there. Not as many of the big mammals like the monkeys and the sloths. They're there, but they're not as abundant as they are in the warmer areas. But yeah, if you're hardcore hikers, I would say Monteverde. The El Tigre waterfall hike in Monteverde is one of my favorites. It's a very strenuous hike, but it's very doable, and there are hanging bridges and waterfalls, and it's really a beautiful hike. So I would say, if you're hikers, go to the cooler climates where you're actually more comfortable hiking. Otherwise, focus more on like a nature walk.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Now, I was going to mention that as well. The climate's a big part of it. And I think when you do love hiking that much and you want to hike from 1 to 4 hours, trying to find some of those parks or areas that have accessible routes or trails. The Monteverde Biological Reserve, inside it has 3 huge trails, which you can take 3 to 4 hours to get all the way round if you wish. So then you can also choose your routes. There's even a point where if you go at the highest point, like you mentioned, at the nice time of year, maybe February, March, you can see both coastlines, which is amazing. But I think it's a good point to mention that most national parks either have a loop trail, most of them, even the smaller ones. Some of them are more accessible. I'm thinking of Carrara National Park, which is like an hour away from San Jose on the way to Jaco or Manuel Antonio. Very easy. You mentioned Manuel Antonio National Park, Ulrik. Super busy. And it is a good loop, but it doesn't really feel like you're hiking per se because you've got so many people going to the beach. So yeah, Monteverde, Santa Elena, those smaller national parks reserves are probably the way to go. I would say it's a good one.
And I would just offer one more thing in there, because I do get asked this sometimes from time to time from really hardcore hikers. Mount Chiripo, which is in the middle of the country, it's the highest mountain in Costa Rica. It's like 12,000 feet. I'm not exactly sure. It's up there, but one of those things that it is a very, very strenuous hike, and also requires a lot of planning and permits and things like that. It's not the kind of thing you can just show up and do. So if you are a hardcore hiker and you're thinking about that, that's something you need to really, really get focused help on and get help on coordinating that, because it's amazing, but it is logistically challenging. So let's put it that way.
That's a really good point. I know Pablo's done it a couple of times. I did it a few years ago. It is stunningly beautiful. If you like proper hiking, 12,000 feet plus. We don't necessarily sell that directly, but you have a good point. There's only so many people that can go into the Parque de Amistad National Park. And you also need to at least spend one night at the base before leaving really early, and one night probably on the summit, as you can't get up and down most of the time in a day. It is amazing if you have the ability. We're going to post those links here. Here's a link for Monteverde for more information.
I actually did it in the beginning of this month. I would recommend for anybody that wants to do it in February. I have done it 3 times, and last 2 times were like in February, and the weather is way better. So yeah, like Jordan says, you need to like plan in advance, but it's an amazing place too.
What's incredible is as you go up, I believe it's about 14 kilometers to base camp and then another 3 to the summit. I think you cover about 7 different geographical climate zones, which is amazing. And February, March, as Pablo says, you get a lot drier weather, and you can even, it can drop below 0. So seeing icicles and the occasional snow flurry in Costa Rica is incredibly rare, but it does happen. So you need to pack accordingly for that. I'm going to finish this later on with what you should pack. So I guess it depends what you're packing, because it does get cold up there. It's not like it's hiking around the rainforest, that's for sure. I have a question here. Loads of questions coming in. Maite, Aaron doing a solid job. Cheryl, thank you for your question. Laura G's are getting the questions flying in. Linny Curtis, Sandy Bard, thanks. Keep them coming, guys. We'll address those in a little bit live. So I did mention earlier about family adventure. So in terms, Ulrik, of some of the best family adventure activities, what would you recommend when you got a family? Maybe your kids are 5 and 10.
Which is what I have. I have a 13-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And to go on Jordan's note where she called it the adventure walk, not a hike, this is where I love it for families. So in RNL, I have to say the Mystico Hanging Bridges, it is a hike, but it's only 3.5 kilometers. But it is strenuous for my 5-year-old and 7-year-old. They loved it. It was the most exciting hike they've ever done in their life, because the guide showed them down to these specific spiders and these specific birds, and you see the volcano in the background. So for me, I consider it a venture hike for my kids, but of course for an adult like Jordan, that's not adventure, but it is absolutely for children. I think the hanging bridges in RNL for kids is fantastic. At the beach, I would have to say the Manuel Antonio National Park, because it's only a very flat boardwalk where you walk through the mangrove. You get to see the wildlife. You can go to the beach, which is the most beautiful white sand beach at the end of the hike. The kids love it. My kids thoroughly enjoyed it. We stayed for an hour or 2, and then we told our guide, "Thank you, we got it from here," and we walked back the way back. And then the other one I think is it's not an adventure, but it's really one that for kids is just amazing, is the catamaran tour that we have in Guanacaste. It is just absolutely great. You get to do snorkeling. They cater to you. You get to see dolphins. If they catch a fish, they do it for you there. They'll fillet it up. It's not really an adventure, but it is an adventure because you're doing everything in one, right?
That's what I'm thinking as you're talking about these things. I think sometimes we forget, maybe the hike at Mystico is a great place, only 3.5 kilometers. That's still an adventure. If you've never really been to the subtropical jungle before, and you're seeing a hanging bridge is 50 meters off the ground, and you've got, sloths and monkeys and toucans and iguanas, that's an adventure experience, right? So again, it goes back to what Jordan said at the beginning. It's like the adventure is very different for everybody, depending on what you're looking to experience. The same thing with catamaran, being out on the ocean, on the Pacific, looking at the sun go down, maybe catching fish, swimming in the warm ocean waters. That's got to be an adventure. So I think it's important to differentiate when we're talking thrills against something that's a little bit more.
Right. And on the catamaran, when you get to the secluded beach that nobody else is, they drop the anchor, and you can either do a kayaking trip, or there's a guide that will go with you. And I'm into sea kayaking, so I love it.
Yeah.
Or you can do a snorkel, and there's a guide that will go along with you snorkeling. And even for the kids that don't know how to snorkel, they put a life jacket on you and give you snorkeling gear, and off you go.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm posting a couple of links to the catamaran tours. We've even got a video on the YouTube channel. So if you guys are interested in checking out the catamaran, check it out. Jordan, what about you? Aside from what Ulrik mentioned, do you have any other family-friendly adventure activities that you think is suitable?
My number one favorite tour that we offer that I've ever done in Costa Rica is our full-day waterfall tour with Paddle 9. It's from the Manuel Antonio area, and it goes to the waterfalls that are in my backyard. So I might be a little bit biased, but they take you to the beach as well, and 3 different waterfalls. It's good for all ages. It's a long day, so you know, if you've got really little kids, they might need to take a nap in on some of the drives. But it's in terms of physical ability, it's very accessible to almost all ages and physical abilities. And it is super fun. There's optional like cliff jumping or optional, everything's optional. You can go swimming, you can go cliff diving, you can do all these things, and
Yeah.
it goes into these little, again, hidden gems, hidden little waterfalls that not everyone knows about, and it's, you know, not that easy to get to. So that and then the tour operator is just, they're so much fun. They are just they are professionals at making the experience just, you know, once in a lifetime. Every single one of my clients always raves about that. And the other one in Guanacaste, I would say, is we have it's called the Fun in the Sun tour.
Yeah,
It's
it's a good one.
it's a private boat tour. And if you're, depending on where your hotel is located, sometimes they even pick you, if you're in the Papagayo area, they pick you up right at the hotel on the beach. And that's customized to you. They take you to different, you know, hidden beaches that you can only access by boat, where there's no other people. You can go snorkeling, you can go fishing, you can go paddle boarding, you know. So that, I think, is, you know, extra special because you can really tailor that to your adventure level. Whereas the catamarans are absolutely super fun. I agree with Ulrik, but if you're looking for something that's going to be really personalized, that Fun in the Sun tour
Yeah.
is probably my favorite tour in the Guanacaste area.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And I mean, as you're chatting there, I think it's a really valid point that really wherever you go in Costa Rica, you will find activity adventures for everyone, from young families, middle-aged couples, older travelers. There's an awful lot of diversity in most of the regions. There's only a few exceptions. You guys mentioned Chiripo, that's obviously not, you know, not ideal for younger kids. But then if you're in Tamarindo, if you're in Guanacaste, Monteverde, Arenal, Central Pacific, there's an awful lot to do for a lot of different people. Yeah, really, really good tips. Guys, thanks for the questions. Keep them coming in. If you do have any questions for us, we will get back to you if you've just joined us late in about 15, 20 minutes or so. Got a couple more questions to get through here regarding adventure travel. So Jordan mentioned the Diamante waterfall down on the central southern Pacific area towards Uvita. Ulrik, what's your one hidden gem adventure place that's not necessarily that well known that you love?
It's not really a hidden gem because I'm biased. Like Jordan says, she's biased. I was biased
Right.
because I lived in Guanacaste for 15 years and managed a hotel there. So I wanted my friends and family that came and visited me in Guanacaste when they stayed at the beach hotel I managed. I wanted them to stay with me, but I know that, you know, to go inland, you know, to go to Arenal, I would lose them for 2 or 3 days. So actually, I became very biased with the Buena Vista canopy spa tour
Oh,
because
yeah.
they would go up there, go do everything you can do at the volcano: hot springs, zip lining, water slide, horseback riding, even a waterfall. There is a hidden waterfall there. And then they'd be back in my hotel that evening. So I was very biased to that tour. And then I got my family hooked onto it. So my sister, every year she'd come and visit me. I'd have her and her kids go. Every year they'd go up there and, you know, they give you a great lunch buffet, a Costa Rican
Yeah.
meal, and you know, and they're back at the beach that evening, so they could do the volcano part for staying at the beach, and that's
Yeah.
why it was my favorite tour for the Guanacaste area. You know,
That's-
not a hidden gem. I really don't have a hidden gem.
Yeah, that's a really good tour to mention because you can do it the whole in a day. You can still be at the beach, and there's not many places around the world where you can find an old 400, I think it's 400-foot water slide in the jungle. I think we've actually, the one I just posted it, the tag is waterfalls and jungle slides. I've done that with the GoPro. I mean, it's crazy, and I know that I think that went on like a viral video a while ago because it's not, you know, you wait at the top and all the water floods and you're just flying through this forest. That is a great one. Yeah, very, very good.
Adam, I have one more. It's
Yeah,
not
tell me.
really that hidden, but it's something that people don't always think of when they think of, and it's the Pequari River. If you're a whitewater rafter, it is class 3, 4. There are a handful of hotels that are only, they're literally in the middle of the jungle, and the way to get to them is rafting in and rafting out. Now, they range all the way from budget, like almost like camping hostel style accommodation there, all the way up to the Pequari Lodge, which is a 5-star luxury, unbelievably beautiful resort. So, but that excursion is that whole like 3-day trip. You kind of need like at least 2, if not 3 nights there. You raft in, which is one of the most fun rivers I've rafted a lot of places in the world, but that is one of my favorite rivers to raft on. And then staying at one of those places in the jungle on your day in between rafting, you can go hiking, zip lining. There's just tons of stuff to do, and there's nobody there. You're in the middle of nowhere, and then you raft out, and it's a really, really cool thing to do.
And to add on to that, Jordan, I'm glad you brought that up, because in Paquari Lodge, you could do rappelling now. They've added rappelling. They have a zip line, which is phenomenal. And they even have birding. And I have some friends of mine that are real birding specialists, and they just said it was one of the best birding places that they had been to. And I loved it. And so adding the birding, the night hike tour, all of that, just, you definitely have to stay minimum 2 nights. 3 nights is perfect.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really get much better in terms of adventure, right? Especially when you're here in the Central Valley. Like you said, the isolation of being on the river. And I'm pretty sure in the off season, like, you know, August through to December, with the amount of rain that falls, there are class 5 sections of Paquare the couple of times I've done it, for sure, because that is the most crazy river in the country. And like you guys mentioned, the lodge is amazing. There was one question, again, I'm going to wait to the end for most of them, but Laura did ask, I'm landing in San Jose Airport. Can I do any adventure tours in the capital? The Paquare River trip, you can do that in a day if you're staying, you know, for a night in San Jose. Go and do the full river, right, without doing the lodge. That's definitely got to be right up there in terms of adventure trips for Central Valley. Is there any others you'd recommend, Jordan, or is that really the best option?
Oh, that's definitely the best option without having to go that far to one of the coasts. Yeah, I would say that you could also check out the Poás volcano, but again, I wouldn't necessarily say adventure, but it's very cool without having to go all the way to Arenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say no, for sure, that full day. It's a full day, but it's worth it to do.
And then there's the La Paz waterfall hike, which is, you know, it's not a bad hike. It's just a lot of steps going down. I think it's something like 700 steps going down, but it's a good waterfall, La Paz waterfall, and it's from San Jose, and it's a good hike down the waterfall.
That's a great day trip. And or as Jordan mentioned earlier, the tour transfer that we use, if you're going to the Arenal volcano, you can get picked up in the morning from San Jose, your hotel, stop at La Paz Waterfall Gardens, which is also a really nice place to stay. It's a lot of steps. So you're right, you might not consider it a hike, but there's a lot of up and down. You get like 4 or 5 waterfalls on that route. And then you can continue your journey to Arenal. So that's a good one. Poás is another good active volcano. So if you guys are coming to the country as volcanologists going to plan a trip to Poás, really active, still need to wear your hard hat. That's a great one on the way up. And if you do have a couple of days in San Jose, you do have the other one, the biggest volcano in the country at Irasu. That would take you about an hour to get to near the other city of Cartago. But that's an amazing experience. So again, perhaps not the most adrenaline based, but in terms of adventure, walking on a volcano crater, I always find that amazing up there. Yeah, that's for sure.
And depending on what your definition of adventure is, my favorite thing to do in almost any city I go to, and San Jose is no exception, is the food tours. We have a food tour, and I like to go on food tours no matter where I go, because it's the best way to be adventurous and try, you know, food of a new culture and stuff. So that's a different kind of adventure, but that's a really good one too.
It is, right? Because if you're in San Jose, maybe you want to see a couple of volcanoes or do Paquare, and you want to try some of the local cuisine or see what San Jose has to offer, that's a whole webinar in itself. But the trying new food is an adventure, no?
And to finish off a foodie, you know, you got to get your Costa Rican cup of coffee. So end up doing a coffee tour in San Jose, where, you know, the Starbucks factory or Starbucks plantations here in San Jose.
Yeah.
The Orosi Valley, you mentioned Irasu, is a phenomenal volcano. It was the first volcano I visited when I came to Costa Rica when I was 12 years old. And I fell in love with it. It was my volcano, because that was the first one I ever saw as a kid. And from there, from Irasu, we went down to the Orosi Valley. In the Orosi Valley, you can go to the Cartago ruins, you can go to the lakes, you can get fresh trucha in the restaurants, and you can go do the coffee from there. So it's really a great area, Cartago, the Orosi Valley.
Oh, there's so much to discuss. Pablo's sharing some really cool links here, which I'm going to share with you guys. We've even done a top restaurants video a while ago, which I think is still pretty awesome. We've discussed a number of volcanoes in this chat. So obviously we've mentioned the Arenal volcano, Rincon de la Vieja in the north, the active volcano Poás here in the Central Pacific, as well as Irasu. You guys can always visit. They generally always have a reserve or a private national park surrounding the volcano. In most cases, you can't go to the summit. Obviously, to the active volcanoes. If you can, like Poas or Irasu, you get as close as you can safely be. And they are usually accessible as a national park, right? You pay your entrance fee anywhere between 10 to 15, 16 bucks if you're a tourist, I believe. But yeah, there's a lot of good volcanoes. I think we can probably find a link for you. And as you mentioned, Ulrik, the coffee, there's another one. We've actually got a tour here. I think Docker Coffee and Waterfalls. There's a lot of links for you guys to work through if you are interested in that. So do check it out. Couple more questions. So I wanted to ask you, Ulrik, in terms of accessibility to adventure travel, we've discussed families, but if I said for beginners, or maybe someone is, maybe it's not as easy to walk for as long, maybe someone with limited experience or limited ability, what's Costa Rica like as a destination?
Well, the good news, the really good news is it's changed a lot in the last 15, 20 years because they passed a law, disability law about 15, 20 years ago. And we didn't even have vans that were, vans for wheelchair accessible vans. Now we have vans that are like that with Ecotrans, one of our partners, a great partner that works with us. They have wheelchair accessible vans. We've had hotels that have done remodelations with wheelchair accessibility and ramps. And it's the same thing. We mentioned the Mystico hanging bridges. We even have on the Mystico hanging bridges, they have a shorter tour for the people that are, not as mobile. And they even have a little scooter that if you reach out to them in advance, they'll be happy to provide that for that particular client's needs. So we have gone a big leaps and bounds for accessible tourism. And there's actually a big segment in Costa Rica for accessible tourism for Costa Rica for people that are wheelchair access and what have you. And we even had one of my colleagues just told me about a couple of weeks ago that they had a blind client that wanted to do the hanging bridges, and they said it was just phenomenal for the blind client to do a hanging bridges tour
and hear the sounds and feel the wind. And you mentioned, talk about an accessibility. There's even zip lines now that can take wheelchair users. It is incredible, and the accessibility of some national parks. I mentioned Carrara earlier on in the podcast. When my daughter was learning to walk and she was just like turning 1, it was a lovely little route, it's like 1 kilometer, all flat, and it's been paved around. Great for accessibility, great for beginners, wheelchair users as well. Very easy to get to from the car park, so straight out. And it's good to hear that Costa Rica is moving really, really fast in terms of that as well.
One thing I would add to that, to what I have a lot of clients who, if they'll ask, they'll say, I want to do things. They're not necessarily, restricted to a wheelchair, but they have older clients that want to do some things, but they may not be very steady. And, it's not like there's paved paths everywhere. You're going to be climbing in the jungle and over roots and stuff. And one piece of advice I always offer, and I use myself, hiking poles. Bring hiking poles. They are really, really, really helpful for a number of things, even just keeping stable on flat ground for older clients and things like that. But they're a really good thing to if you're checking a bag, you have to check a bag for that one because you can't take them on a carry-on. But they're really helpful, especially for older clients who want to be able to keep up and might need a little assistance, but it's not as full on as like a wheelchair or a walker or something like that. So hiking poles are your friend.
Oh yeah, that's a great tip, especially if you're traveling for hiking.
And for water-based activities, we have, for example, you think of rafting, that's you need to be fit for that and what have you. But we have softer things such as the safari float tour. So that's, I put elderly people on a safari float where it's a very soft, mild meandering down a creek, and it's really nice. You still get to see the wildlife. And so it's very accessible for clients. And the same thing for fishing. We have marinas now. We have clients that go out full-fledged fishing on wheelchairs, and it's not a problem.
It's a really good, it goes back to the very first question. What makes Costa Rica one of the best places in the world for adventure travel? It's accessible to everybody, all ages, right? All demographics, and anybody that wants to come down for whatever kind of adventure you're looking for. Well, I got a couple of questions before I discuss and get your top tips in what to pack. It's important to mention safety and how good I think Costa Rica is in terms of safety. Sometimes people ask, oh, is it safe? Is it okay? Jordan, how serious do the tour operators, especially the ones we work with, take safety for any type of tour?
Well, yeah, obviously safety is a number one priority. I know that, not all tour operators are created equal. I know all of the ones that we work with, we extensively vet them for safety as well as quality and service. I always say if it's, you know, you never want to go with the cheapest option because you never know how that's going to be, how that's going to go. But in terms of things like zip lining, there, as far as I know, there's never been an issue ever, an incident in Costa Rica with the zip lining in terms of, you know, something horrible happening. And I was the one piece of safety advice people may not think of is, you know, it's a great idea. I want to go hiking in the jungle and do it on my own. There's critters in the jungle. So you know, I always encourage people, especially if you don't know where you're going, go with a guide because their job is to make sure that they see the critters before you do, or they know where the areas are that are going to be, you know, prone to things like landslides, stuff like that. So, you know, safety is a top concern because there are so many potential hazards, but you know, all of the tour operators that we work with and our drivers and in our transportation are focused, of course, number one on safety. So
yeah. I couldn't agree more. On every tour that I've ever done, they always take the safety drills at the beginning super seriously. It's essential, whether it's zip lining, whether you're comfortable, whether it's whitewater rafting, ATVs, horses, you never know what you're doing, right? Even little hikes, the guides will go over the protocol. I totally agree. We do have a video that's, you know, is Costa Rica safe? I'll post it here. It's a bigger question about, you know, just traveling in general. It doesn't focus as much, but it's worth noting. A lot of people ask. Very safe, and the tours it's essential for the tourism to be successful, right? So there's a lot of rules as well by law that they have to go through to become a tour operator. And like you mentioned, Jordan, we only work with the best ones in the country that we ourselves guarantee that we would love to do ourselves. So yeah, so hopefully
add one more piece to that is also, especially this time of year you're coming though, you do have to manage some expectations. So like you said, you know, with whitewater rafting or whether it's a fishing or excursion or something on a boat, if there's a weather related hazard, you could potentially, some of your excursions could get canceled, but they, you know, that is their dedication to the safety being the number one thing that could happen. So just knowing your managing expectations, especially for coming during a shoulder or a rainy season. And then in terms of safety in general in Costa Rica, I always like to tell my clients, I've lived here for 8 years as a single female, and I've never I feel more safe living in Costa Rica as a single female than I did in the United States. So let's put it that way.
and to piggyback on Jordan feeling safe, I mean, I've raised my family. They go to an American school in San Jose. And, you know, do I feel safe? I always tell them my wife drives the kids to school on a golf cart. That's how safe it is.
In San Jose. Love it. That says a lot about the driving in Costa Rica and the culture.
And the car seats. Yeah.
Exactly. We actually have a question, I think, about the best time to travel. So before I get to the Q&As, the last one I want to ask you guys today, what should I pack for an adventure getaway? I'll throw this to you, Ulrik. We've already got some cool things in terms of adventure poles, hiking poles.
Well, Jordan stole the show with adventure poles. Now I'm thinking, I would say good water shoes that you don't mind getting wet, because when you go on a hike, like Jordan said, you're going to be stepping over, you know, it might not be a branch or a twig. It might be a vine that's moldy and slimy. You're going to get muddy.
Yeah.
You're going to get your feet into the mud. You're going to step in through some puddles that are just, especially if you come my favorite time of the year, the end of the rainy season, November, is still going to have some water areas. You're going to get wet. Gore-Tex pants, Gore-Tex shirt. You don't have to go buy the whole outfit, but have one outfit that you're comfortable when you go out on your expedition, right? Yeah. And so that to me is a must. Just, you know, good shoes. You don't care if they get wet. Definitely a rain poncho that can get wet and can dry off real fast. That kind of clothing.
Yeah, no, 100%. The water shoes are a really good thing that I think have come a long way in the last 10 years, not just sandals, closed water shoes. A lot of people ask, can I just, you know, wear these tennis shoes, these trainers to go hiking? I'm like, you can, but they're not going to dry as quick, and they're not necessarily, depends where you're going, right? Which national park you're going in. Is this a half an hour walk, or is this a 4-hour trek into the rainforest? In which case, take your hiking shoes, maybe not boots. It does get hot, but maybe hiking trainers, hiking tennis. Jordan, what else do you consider like essential when coming down for adventure?
Well, I always say less is more when it comes to packing for Costa Rica, especially for women. They tend to overpack sometimes. I say it's very casual here, and it's most of the time very hot, so you don't need a lot of stuff. But the 3 things that I always say: a headlamp. I always like to have a headlamp because you always wanted to see where your feet are going and your hands are going, especially if you're walking around in the dark. A lot of hotels will provide flashlights if it's pretty remote and it's not well lit. but a headlamp is small, easy. It's always good to have some lighting. I know people have on their phones and stuff, but the headlamp is a tool. Depending on the time of year and what you're doing, a dry bag is really good.
Oh, yeah.
So you can, especially if you have anything that's like, electronics or anything, you can put that in there if you're, a dry bag. And then the number one is a reusable water bottle, because the water is safe to drink in Costa Rica. And a lot of people don't know that. And they think it's like most parts of Latin America, but it's not. The water is safe and delicious to drink. And Costa Rica is really dedicated to the environmental element. So bring your water bottle, fill it up. And I specifically ones like a hydro flask, the insulated water bottles that don't condensate and sweat, because otherwise you're going to get wet. So,
and
but
it keeps the water cooler.
And Adam, you earlier we mentioned Chiripo. I did the Chiripo. I did the overnight thing. You definitely want to make sure it's a Gore-Tex thermal sleeping bag, because my dad did not, and he went the cheapo route. He got one of those Costa Rican homemade sleeping bags. In the middle of the night, he crawled into the sleeping bag with me. So I learned my experience, like, make sure you bring the right, sleeping bag when you're sleeping up there, because it drops below freezing.
Yeah, no, it's really true. And again, ask, if you are planning a vacation with us, ask your travel consultant, your travel expert, exactly what you're doing and what should you prepare for, said tour. Because Chiripo is not like the rest of the country, and it will get below freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit and colder. That's a unique experience. Jordan, I agree, thin layers, it saves a lot on packing as well. I've got this personal thing about, we call them torches in the UK, flashlights, that I bring my own just because it's always going to be more powerful than the hotels, because my batteries are probably newer. And then you've got these little weak ones. The hotels do give them to you, but I always want to have a really good flashlight to look at, all the wildlife. If you're doing a night tour, it's a good one. Obviously the headlamps, but yeah, really good tips, guys. I've put in the what to pack video. We did that a couple of years ago. I think a lot of it is still very relevant if that helps you packing for your vacation. So that covers our top 10 questions regarding adventure travel. We've got a bunch of questions that have come in. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed that. I'll be posting Jordan and Ulrik's email shortly in the chat, so you can reach out to those guys. Let's have a little look at some of the questions for our questions and answer session. Aaron and Maite have done a really good job in responding, but let's throw some of them out to you guys. There's a very open-ended question that Laura G started off, which is, when is the best time of year to visit Costa Rica for outdoor adventure? I mean, how do you answer that?
Do I have a preference? Yes, I do, but that's because of the things I like to do, right? I like to the very end of November. It's still not the high season. Not everybody's coming into Costa Rica. And keep in mind, Costa Rica's got 11 different climatic temperate zones. So my preference is right around Thanksgiving week. I love Costa Rica. Everything's still lush and green. Most of the rain areas have subsided. And so that's my preference, especially in the area of Manuel Antonio. Jordan knows that's the most beautiful area, in my opinion, for that time of the year. If it's in Guanacaste, my favorite time of the year is June and July, because we have our Costa Rican summer holidays, but it's the least rainfall, but you still get an occasional, maybe a half-hour shower, like we call in Florida, the sun shower. So I like it in that area. In Monteverde, February, I think it's absolutely gorgeous. The same thing for Chiripo, San Gerardo de Lota. I love February. I love the San Jose Mountains in February. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The weather is absolutely stunning. I go camping up in the mountains by Heredia in Barba, so I love those areas in February. Jordan, I'm sure you have your preferences, right?
Well, I think the main thing, I would have a different answer for depending on exactly where you're going. So for me, and where I live in the Central Pacific Zone and Southern Zone, my favorite month is April. It's after the hottest, driest time of the year, but in that part of the country, it never gets brown or dry. It's still lush and green all year round. But the heat can be quite oppressive in the dry season. So when it starts to rain a little bit in April and it washes the dust off everything and the jungle comes back to life, I love April, as long as you avoid Holy Week, Semana Santa. Don't come during Easter. But the
Yes,
but no, I would say April, avoiding that major holiday week. But also what you said, if we're going to Costa, I would say yes, end of November through the beginning of December, avoiding the Christmas holidays. That way, because up in April, Guanacaste is going to be really like brown and dry and almost burnt because it's so hot up there and so dry. So yeah, those are my sweet spots. I tell people to come April or November, early December.
And want to add on to what Jordan said about avoiding Semana Santa. The reason being avoiding Semana Santa is, for those of you that don't know, living in Costa Rica, is typically Easter week. All the Costa Ricans that live in the Central Valley, the 1.5 million, head out to the beaches. So
Yeah.
I like Semana Santa up in the volcano areas because there's no one there and it's quiet and it's peaceful. So yeah, Semana Santa, Jordan's absolutely spot on. It's just that everyone takes the whole week off, and it's Costa Rican, the adult version of spring break with their grandmother.
It's so true. For those of us that are either going to work in peace or just staying in San Jose, all the roads are clear. Everything's really calm outside. There's no traffic. There's no queues. Everybody's at the beach. It's crazy. It's like the 2 peak weeks at Christmas into the New Year. Everybody, obviously, you have the vacation time. It's understandable, but it gets really busy on a national level as well as all the tourism internationally. I also think it depends on the time of year, depending on if you are really fascinated with whitewater rafting. Come in the green season, May to November. If you've got more rainfall, you'll have more water in the rivers. If you're looking to do whitewater rafting in Pequara and you really want to do it, but it's February, March, it will be slightly lower. The same in Arenal, the same on the Central Pacific. So, obviously you can bear that in mind. You can ask based on the activities. Like you mentioned, if you're looking for whales, come
The wildlife
season.
specific. Yeah, wildlife specific is a good one, because if you really want to see, either turtles, whales, things that are very specific seasons, they may not align perfectly with the best weather. But if you want to see the best chances of seeing the specific wildlife, there are very specific times. So
I mean, if you want to hike in national parks and see more wildlife and less other tourists come in the green season, September, October, November, wear that rain jacket. You're going to get wet in the rainforest, but you will get a different experience, right, than you would do in the high season when it potentially is slightly drier. Very, very cool. Good questions. And I think Aaron and Maite kind of reflected that. We already answered John's question. He was asking Jordan, your favorite place down in Uvita. And Laura asked us another question. Are there any hidden spots for unique adventure experiences, more remote, not too touristic? Well, obviously, Ulrik, you mentioned Buena Vista tour. Obviously, it's quite popular up there.
Yeah.
Any other?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, Tortuguero. It is popular, but it can't get more popular because there's no road into there. That is the true Costa Rican Amazon. The way to get in there is by puddle jumper or by boat.
Yeah.
So there's very few lodges in that area. And Jordan mentioned just a few minutes ago about the turtle nesting and some great tarpon fishing. So you can do both. And manatees. So it's a very unique experience, and it can't get overcrowded than what it is because there's no roads into there. So Tortuguero is a very unique, in my opinion, a hidden gem because the way to get in there is to do the puddle jumper. It's the best way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the hotels are right along this beautiful, calm river where you can see manatees and all kinds of wildlife. It's a really special place. In my opinion, I love Tortuguero.
Yeah, it's a really, really unique place as well. We've got a link here for you guys to check it out if you are interested. You can take a transfer, as you mentioned, up to the boat and take the canals in, or you can fly directly into the town. Really good for wildlife if you do want that experience. I agree. It's interesting. Aaron made a really good point in one of his answers here, that the Hotel Rio Perdido is actually a really interesting off the beaten path track in kind of the middle of Guanacaste between Arenal, where you've got a lot of adventure directly on site. So if you're looking for mountain biking, rappelling canopy through a canyon, hot springs in the river, that's a unique hotel in itself, which has kind of created a location. Pablo, I know that's one of your favorite spots. Would you agree? Post this link.
Yeah, totally. It has everything. If you are looking for adventure, it has an amazing adventure park, zip lining. It has like a via ferratas. If you like mountain bike, it's especially I love mountain bikes, so it's like a really good spot I go back to a lot. And they have like a mountain bike park. It's a really unique also landscape. If you are in Costa Rica, you'll notice that it's like a little bit, the forest changes. So it has like really a unique sense. And also the fact that they have like natural hot springs in the river is just makes it a like really cool place to like do adventure in the morning and then just rest in the river afterwards. So yeah, I recommend it. It's one of my favorite spots for sure.
And
Yeah.
then we have one last place in San Jose that's very unique, and that's the El Silencio Lodge, which is super unique as well.
For those of you that have followed me over the years, either on Frog TV or the podcast, know that that's my favorite hotel in the country. We were lucky enough to be shooting there and doing some new video very recently. It's a great place. Again, like 45 minutes, an hour from San Jose. So many adventures on site. We counted like 15, including archery, as well as rappelling and horseback riding and zip lining. I mean, there is a lot to do. And that's a great one. That's like in the cloud forest. So a lot of these lodges here in Costa Rica have these unique experiences associated with them. Definitely post a link for you guys if you want to check out El Silencio here in the chat.
And then the one
go
more
for it, Jordan.
just-
Yeah.
one more thing I would just say, it's not a specific place, but one of the most adventurous things you can do in Costa Rica is driving. So if you are feeling adventurous and you want to go on more off the beaten path kind of things, renting a car and taking matters into your own hand, it's definitely not my recommendation for most people. But if you're well traveled and you're up for adventure and you're not stressed out by, questionable driving, you are, renting a car is a good option too. And you can really get to some places that you would never be able to get to, on like with these big tour buses and things like that. So,
Jordan, with my first recommendation for first time travelers at Costa Rica is use the old Greyhound slogan, leave the driving to us, just for the first time, that you could sit back and have a cold Costa Rican cerveza and let us do the driving. The second time you want to come adventure, you do the driving, have fun.
That is something that I would like to discuss in more detail at some point in a webinar, because getting around Costa Rica and the experience of renting a car, for sure, absolutely crazy. That's quite a good one. I agree. Somebody's raised their hand, Megan Johnson. If you have a question, please do get it over to us on the Q&As, and we will hopefully address it straight away for you. Somebody asked a question, Jadiska, I think that was how I was pronouncing it. She wanted to get your opinion. She's been to Arenal Volcano and the Manuel Antonio Beach. She's looking forward to coming back. What are your favorite beaches that are a bit softer and calmer waters? Jordan, I'll throw that one to you.
Yeah, so my favorite, I'm not a wave person. I like it to be calm and tranquil. I'm not a surfer. And if I go in the ocean, I usually like to go under it as opposed to in there. Like I like to go scuba diving.
Yeah.
I would say my favorite beach, one of them is in Uvita. It's in the Marina Ballena National Park. So the beach is actually the national park. So there's no development on the beach. It's really pristine and untouched. It's a really beautiful beach. There are waves, but not to the point where they're overpowering.
Yeah.
So that one's and that's like the famous whale tail coral formation is there. It's a really beautiful beach. But then in Guanacaste, I think my favorite beach is up in Papagayo because it's really calm and flat water and it feels kind of like the Caribbean. Those would be my favorite beaches.
Yeah, very nice. Ulrik, do you have a particular preference?
Well, Jordan stole my thunder. I like the hotel that I like that is very calm beach is El Mangrove. The water's almost like a lake. You walk out. Now it's Playa Panama, but it's just so calm. I can take a 1-year-old or a 6-month-old and I'll feel totally chill, as opposed to going to something like Tamarindo or Flamingo where you've got waves that can crash in.
Yeah.
So
it's a good point. And Maite responded as well. If you guys are traveling perhaps in September, October on the Caribbean side around Puerto Viejo, Cahuita, you've also got really nice Caribbean, a lot softer, super crystal clear waters, really good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Playa Uva over there, I believe, is
Playa Uva, and Manzanillo at the Punta is really nice. Yeah, really good shouts. John Norris says that the adventure connection is great. We did the whitewater rafting. That's awesome, John. Glad to hear that. Cheryl was asking, what's the best time of year for whale watching? So I should ask you, Jordan. Obviously, you're our resident diver and aquamarine specialist. Where should you go and what should you see?
Well, so again, Ovita, because that is where the
Yeah.
that it's got literally got a whale tail formation where
Yeah.
the whales come. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing. The primary whale season is like September, October. So like right now, it does tend to be the rainiest 2 months as well in that area. So that is a trade-off. We have a secondary whale season, which is like January, February. So the whales come from both hemispheres at different times of the year. There are more in September, October, but there are still a good number in January and February, which is the high season and the dry season. So if you're looking, if you're real big on the whales, then I would come in September, October. But if you want a good chance of seeing whales, but also want to do a bunch of other things and don't want to get rained on, then January, February, where it would be better.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you can even see them if you're on the land, on the beach or in your
Oh
hotel.
yeah.
Great view. You can just watch them there. It's amazing. Highly recommended. Excellent. We asked about Laura was asking about tours from San Jose, which we discussed. John, interested in if any of you have a hidden gem recommendation near Las Catalinas. And thanks for the Uvita recommendation, Jordan. He's added it to his bucket list. Ulrik, from Las Catalinas, where might someone go?
Well, that's okay. That's a good one because when I was younger, growing up in that area before Catalinas was developed, we would take a sailboat over to Las Catalinas. Now, when you do the catamaran tour with Panache, it's actually a little further south. There's north. Sorry, there's a beach there that's very secluded where they can drop anchor. So there's some islands that are kind of almost abutting on the beach areas, just to the north of Las Catalinas. And if you do the private boat tour that Jordan mentioned earlier, the Fun and Sun, that's one of my favorite. And you go to that beach there and you can do a little barbecue on that beach there. You can snorkel on the back side of the rocks there, which is really nice. And when I did the the sailboat there, we would actually drop anchor and spend night there on the inside bay area. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's a great place. Hit the ocean and get out there. Some of those beaches around that area are absolutely stunning. Thanks, John, for the question. Leanie Curtis, will you be emailing the links to the attendees of the webinar? We will, guys. So tomorrow you will get notification for those of you that attended the webinar, and even those that didn't. We will be uploading the webinar to our YouTube channel, so you guys can watch this back at your leisure, and then hopefully answer the questions or get any other questions in the descriptions on YouTube. There was a question from Sandy that came in here. We're definitely interested in escaping the cold, and as such, we're planning a trip in January, February, perhaps even early March. How hot does it get during these months? And do the temperatures limit what you can do because it's even too hot to move? What about bugs, particularly mosquitoes, during these months? You mentioned how hot it gets, Jordan, and the importance of the time of the year. Again, it depends, right, where you are in the country. Guanacaste can get really hot, high 90s occasionally. San Jose is pretty moderate. Central Valley, 70, 80 year round. But I don't think it ever gets too hot to do any tours, not to my knowledge.
No, you just got to dress appropriately, wear light athleisure wear, things you're going to sweat. So just making sure you're comfortable. I like to bring a hand fan everywhere I go. That's another thing you could put on your packing list. Yeah, it's I would say realistically, you're looking at very, high 80s, even into the 90s for January, February. In Guanacaste is much drier and there's some wind up there. Whereas down where I am, you're in the dense jungle where it's very, very humid and not a lot of wind. So it feels even more hot because it just doesn't move. So it's hot, so just dressing appropriately, and then leaving things like you don't need makeup, you don't need your hair dryer, things like that. It's embracing it instead of fighting it is kind of the way to go. But it is warm if you are very sensitive to the heat. Most of the hotels that we work with have air conditioning, although most of the places like restaurants and things are going to be outdoors. So that's where that hand fan is a helpful thing to have with you. But yeah, it can be quite warm. But if you escaping the freezing cold from North America during that time, it'll feel good.
That's a big switch, right? You can go from 0 to plus 35 Celsius anyway.
Yeah.
Very quickly. Have you noticed any changes over the years, Ulrik, from when you were growing up in Guanacaste to now?
Oh, absolutely. First time I was in the Flamingo Tamarindo area was in the early 1980s, and most of the hotels there were there were no big hotels. There were cabinas, and they only had ceiling fans or oscillating fans, and they didn't use air conditioning. So, air conditioning is more abundant throughout the country, but it's not needed. Like in Monteverde, you don't need air conditioning. In Tortuguero, there's one or two hotels that have air conditioning. The rest don't. But it's just because you're in the tropics, you get the tropical breeze, and the temperature does drop in the evening. It's just coping through the day, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've noticed that Costa Rica, now pretty much every place has air conditioning, so you don't have to worry about it. The temperature, I love the San Jose Valley temperature year round. That's why I live in San Jose. But
Yeah.
Guanacaste, as Jordan said, January and February are still nice months. I think for me personally, living there for 15 years, the hotter time of the year is always going to be March and April, just because it's the very peak hot time.
And it does get warm, so you do need to plan accordingly.
Adam, I was going to address the mosquito question because I get that a lot. It is shocking to me because I'm from the Northeast New England area in the US, and I go back there in the summer for, a couple weeks, and every time I'm always shocked. The mosquitoes are so much worse in the US in the summertime than they are anytime in Costa Rica. And I think it's because Costa Rica, we have a really healthy ecosystem with, all the critters that eat mosquitoes. So yeah, they do come out like sometimes like, around sunset for about an hour or so. And if you're really susceptible to mosquitoes, they can be sometimes, bothersome. But in my opinion, not anywhere near as they are in the summertime in the US. But of course, wearing, DEET, if you are susceptible, it is, always a good idea to have some repellent, whether it be the natural stuff or DEET. But it's not something to avoid coming to the jungle because they really aren't that bad.
I agree. Most of the country, I always say that in the transitional periods like May and then November is when occasionally you see a little bit more in between the transition from the early rains to when the then rain stops to the high season, and mainly on the coasts. But even then, it's never that bad. Like you said,
if Aaron could chime in, he would tell you that, around Minnesota, around the lakes, it's just 10 times worse, the mosquito situation. Or even for me, who lived in Florida for a few years, the mosquitoes are way worse than what people make out, as Jordan says.
It's funny. I also live in the Central Valley area, and it just made me think, as you were talking about AC units, there's obviously a lot of thrift stores and thrift Amazon stores for people who want to go and buy products that maybe don't make it. And they sell a lot of these in Costa Rica. Every time I've popped into one, I'm always amazed about the amount of heaters that seem to get left. I'm like, who is heating their house in Costa Rica? Sure, if you're in maybe Cartago in the mountains, you need an AC unit for most of the places if you want to keep a room cold. So heaters are not really needed. It's quite rare. We've got a comment here. Lini says they're heading to Pacuari adventure, outdoor adventure tomorrow. Very exciting. Staying in Turrialba and Rio Vistas. So excited. Turrialba is a lovely location. Obviously, the active volcano. Aaron spent many years there. He recommends it for sure. And if you're there, there's a place called Club Cafe and Happy Dipper restaurants downtown. So there you go, directly from Aaron. Couple of final questions here. How about Refugio Nacional Curu? Now, I've not been to that refugio. Have you guys? Have you been, Pablo? We'll have to find out. There might
never been there.
I've seen it. This would be somewhere I really want to go. Maite says it's a lesser known wildlife refuge with good hiking trails, and you can also kayak and snorkel in the area. Very secluded, so it makes it less popular among travelers, but very beautiful. So there you go, Maite, with a good response there. Melissa Elliott, she says, do you recommend the Nayuaka, I can never pronounce it, Nayuaka waterfalls for small children between the ages of 3 and 6? Is that too young, Jordan, or is that okay?
Depends on how you get there. There's multiple ways to get there. You can either hike up there, which would probably be a little bit too much for a 3-year-old. It could be, a 6-year-old could do it if they're active and athletic. You could carry the 3-year-old if you wanted to do that in like a backpack. It's like, I think if you do the whole thing, it's like 4 kilometers, if I'm remembering correctly. And there's 2 ways to get in there. There are 2 entrances, but you could do there by hiking, or there's a horseback riding option. I think 3 is too young for that one, unfortunately. But then there's also like an ATV, like not a vroom vroom ATV, but like a truck, like a 4x4 truck that will come in a different way. You still have to hike a bit. So, but the answer, that's the long answer. The short answer is yes, it's worth it. You can do that. You could do it with 3 and 6-year-olds as long as they're adventurous and you guys are, pretty, physically fit and stuff. And it's for sure worth it. It's a very, very impressive waterfall.
Awesome. No, fantastic. Melissa, I hope that helps you out. So if your kids are adventurous, get on it. I will send you the direct link to the YouTube channel very shortly. Costa Rican Vacations on YouTube is how you can find us with a lot of our videos. And we do mean to make a video on that waterfall very soon. So I'll get that over. Michelle Rosson, how about the mosquitoes and flies in March? Well, we've mentioned that. Again, not too bad. March is very dry, so Costa Rica tends not to be too much of an issue. Mike is asking, when is the best time of year? This one's for you, Ulrik. When is the best time of year to fish offshore or on the coastal Pacific area? And what is recommended to bring along? Where recommended tips for boat crew? You're a big fisherman.
Yeah, I love it. So we got really, really baller fishing in the Central Pacific, typically from December till April for the sailfish, the yellowfin tuna out of Quepos, Los Sueños, Jaco area. In the marlin, kind of run a little bit on a different schedule. Fishing is great year round in Costa Rica, but peak best fishing for December, January, February. That's when they have all the sailfish tournaments out of Quepos and Los Sueños. Then in July and June and August, I would say you're better off up in Guanacaste. So it depends on what kind of hotels your travel consultant's going to put you through. If you're going to go up to hotels that you want all inclusive, they're typically in the north in Guanacaste area. I more like the bed and breakfast kind of hotels in the Central Pacific. Plus, they've got the 2 good marinas there, being in Quepos, the Pez Vela Marina, and then the Los Sueños Marina. But you've got some good marinas up in Guanacaste now, in Flamingo, and in Papagayo. So you have good fishing up there for offshore. Now, inshore is pretty much great fishing year round. And that's for the rooster fish, all the other meat fish species, such as the snapper, Cupera snapper. I could go on. I mean, really, but to answer the question more directly, for offshore, you're going to say December to April in Quepos area for the sailfish and marlin and the big pelagics.
Fantastic. I definitely want to do a sport fishing webinar, I think, as well as a podcast, because there's a lot to discuss. Some great sport fishing, as you mentioned. I know it's a big topic. Okay, couple more before we wrap up. Lini is asking, are you a travel agency? Do you work with travel agents or host agencies? We do. If you actually reach out to us, we do work with travel agents directly, so we can help you guys out. You can reach out to you could either reach out to Ulrik and Jordan to get a bit more of an explanation, or we can send you some information directly. So no problem there. Andrea Ferrante, best place to snorkel in late June. That's very specific. Jordan, where would someone go to snorkel in June?
So as a diver, I will be honest, I'm a little bit of a snorkeling snob. But I would say the snorkel, if you're an avid snorkeler and you snorkel all around the world, I like to manage expectations when it comes to shore snorkeling in Costa Rica. There's stuff to see, but it's, in my opinion, not change your life snorkeling. That being said, the best place to snorkel, if you're in the South Pacific, is Isla de Caño, Caño Island, which is again the dive spot, but it does require a pretty lengthy boat ride to get out there. So depending on how hardcore you are about snorkeling, that is the best spot. Otherwise, the really good ways to do snorkeling, we had mentioned it a few times, the catamaran tours, the private boat tours, they go to smaller, more like remote beaches and rock formations that might be only accessible by boat where there is really good snorkeling. So I would say the best options for snorkeling, and doesn't matter what time of year, to be honest, would be through one of those boat trips, like the catamarans, where they make a stop for snorkeling at spots that have good snorkeling. Or if you're more hardcore about it, then making a specific trip to Caño Island would be the best.
We also have a really good snorkel location in June, which would be in the area of the Caribbean side and the South Caribbean side of Costa Rica. And so we do have 2 really good snorkeling tours in that area for that time of the year that I would recommend.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, yeah, the Caribbean side, obviously, it's a lot softer. You don't see as much, the sand doesn't churn up as much as other beaches do. So to your point, Jordan, when you can get out on a boat and get a little bit further away, maybe to a few rock formations that is not so what's the word I'm thinking of, when it really turns up and it gets a little bit harder to see, it is a lot clearer. So it is nicer for sure.
But
I
it's
hope.
not, but just in terms of the managing the expectations, a lot of people are expecting like the Caribbean, like Belize or the
Yeah.
islands, walk off the shore and there's a ton of coral, and it's not going to be like that. So
No.
No, that's a good point. I am
Very
also a big diver. I love diving. I do like snorkeling, but once you go diving, you want to be further down and stay underwater for longer.
yeah.
I agree. You know, the Pacific side is not, the visibility is not going to be as long, as distant. If you get to the Caribbean, obviously June you might see a shower or two. It's not quite as dry as September and October if you are on that side, but the clarity of the water there is very, very nice, and it does go on for a little bit. Okay, well, finally, Adam Wallenfang says, I visited in 2019. I stopped in Manuel Antonio, but spent most of my time at the hotel. I was curious how to find tours of the peninsula. Well, if you do want to get back in touch, Adam, and you want to come to Costa Rica, we can help you with any of those tours. Just reach out to us or any one of your travel consultants. I saw Maite responded, or you can reach out, of course, to Jordan and Ulrik on this webinar. Guys, thank you so much for your time today. We've covered a lot of ground discussing adventure travel. I hope you enjoyed that. I have put both of your guys' contact information in the chat. So if you want to reach out to Jordan or Ulrik, you can do so. And as ever, this will be live from tomorrow afternoon. So if you want to rewatch it, you can do so. If you have any questions for us, please always let us know in the comments box on the YouTube channel. And we may include some of your questions in future webinars. Who knows? We've got a lot to come in the next few months. So hopefully you'll join us. Pablo, Ulrik, Jordan, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. Hope to catch up with you again sometime soon.
Thank you,
guys.
buddy.
Take care, guys. Have a lovely rest of your September. Goodbye.
Fantastic.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Goodbye.